Some conversations were never meant to be recorded. This one was. Dick Schultz, University of Iowa basketball coach, ran the NCAA, and led the United States Olympic Committee. Kevin Cramton, author of Tuned, former CEO, who has led billion-dollar deals around the globe and credits Dick as his greatest mentor.
Sometimes life, you get out of tune.
If you keep your focus in the right place, and then life will become a true adventure for you.
In a world moving faster than ever, it's easy to lose rhythm. These conversations help you find it again.
The A and B students all end up working for the C students.
This is not a masterclass. This is not a playbook. It's just real talk from two men who have done it. Welcome to Tune Talks.
Sometimes life, you get out of tune. Mm-hmm. Relationships get out of tune, and they're just not right. How do you go about getting relationships back in tune? I guess you could say, much like tuning a car or tuning a musical instrument, that the best thing to do is to be doing constant maintenance to make sure you don't get way out of tune.
You know, first of all, that's when this good friend that you can talk to and trust and get feedback from is important. Mm-hmm. So you can start with that. But there's a time when you just have to sit down with a person and say, look, I've probably made some mistakes along the way, and I've damaged our relationship. I need your feedback. Mm-hmm. What do we have to do to make that relationship right and help you be more productive? And it's amazing sometimes the answers you get.
Have you experienced, I do X and Y preemptively to try to avoid the number of the situations where I get way out of tune, or is it feel, I mean, how do you kind of gauge the various situations you're in, be it you were coaching or professionally with, as you're walking through this, or even it can be family, it can be other friends. How do you get a feel? Is it an art? Is it more science, that there's certain disciplines that you should be putting in place to try to position yourself where you're limiting the amount of times where things get way out of tune versus address it on an ad hoc basis? How do you think about that?
Well, I think first of all, you need to find out are things getting out of tune because our processes are not right, our policies need some adjustment. I think you need to understand that. Or is this a personality situation? I think you need to kind of flesh that out first of all. If it's policy and program, then you need to get your staff together. You need to get input from everybody and say, okay, let's come up with a plan and get this thing back operating the way it should and collectively be effective. And if it's a personal thing, then you may have to humble yourself and just sit down with that individual or maybe a small group of people and say, look, we've got some problems here. What do we have to do to straighten it out? Is there something I'm doing that's causing this? If so, let me know what it is. Is there an issue at home that's creating this problem? You don't have to tell me the whole problem, but let me know that that is a problem and you need more time with your family. Right. You just need to, if it's a personal thing, you just need to be able to sit down and work it out with that individual. And if you can't get it worked out sometime, then you just have to let them go.
Right. And when you kind of look at legacy and lasting legacy, a lot of people say the most important lasting legacy is your relationship with your family and close friends, because you're going to have a lot of acquaintances in the case of life. You've had a chance to live a few years. I mean, what's your thoughts on that philosophy, the importance of the legacy of relationships?
Well, I think relationships are important, and the people that have good relationships are the people that leave a good legacy behind them. And the people that don't have those relationships yet have had some success, people forget pretty quick about what you did because there wasn't a closeness that was there and they didn't feel like they were a part of it. That was something that the CEO ramrodded because he wanted that and he thought it would work, but it wasn't something we were a part of. So I think those relationships are important if you want to be successful, first of all, and secondly, to leave a good legacy.
Right. You've continued on being a doer. I mean, a lot of folks, they get to a certain point and they say, I'm going to go play golf, go retire somewhere. You haven't done that. You've taken a different tact. I mean, as you mentioned, you were working for the U.S. Olympic Committee. Later, you were involved in the CEO Forum. You were traveling internationally to China. At one point, we were talking earlier, sometimes a couple times a month. Clearly being active and continuing on. And it sounds like you don't buy into this modern definition of you kind of retire and go off and golf.
I worked with a lot of CEOs where companies had mandatory retirement, 60 or 64, 65, they had to retire. And one of the interesting issues, when one of the first things we did when I was with the forum, Mac and I invited 10 CEOs to Atlanta who had retired within the last 2 years. And we gave them some questions, and we spent 2 days with them. And it was really interesting. One fellow, for example, said, well, I thought I'd stay away from the office after the new CEO got there, and I stay away for at least a month, and then I'd go back and see how he's doing. He says, I went back in 30 days and nobody knew who I was. And we just had all kinds of conversations like that. But my advice to the CEOs I was working with, okay, just because you have a mandatory retirement, that doesn't need to retire. I can give you all kinds of examples of CEOs who retired and figured they're going to spend the rest of their life on the golf course. Mm-hmm. In 5 years, they're mentally not sharp anymore. Mm-hmm. Their health has gone down. I said, get involved in a couple of boards, get involved in other activities. Otherwise, I said, your brain is like your muscles. It's a muscle. You got to exercise it or it's going to go dead on you. And I said, if you want to have a good, long life, find things you can be active in. Maybe it's your church, maybe it's a school, maybe it's with a group of people, but get yourself involved. And that's kind of the way I've led my life. Mm-hmm. I'm still now at almost 96. I get frustrated if I don't have things to do. I've got to have something to do. Right. Otherwise, I'm wasting time, and the Lord's not going to be happy with me because I'm not using the skills He gave me.
And there's so many experiences and that you can share. And the other thing that I think this is especially true of our grandkids going forward, their expectation should be that you constantly have to be learning because you may have multiple careers, and you've demonstrated that, but I think it's even accelerating. And so if you're not with a mindset that I'm constantly learning, constantly be doing new things, I'm constantly open to new challenges, and having that kind of attitude and pushing forward through that, I think you're going to be disappointed and not achieve the potential because that has to be the attitude that you have.
Yeah, I've seen in my lifetime, I've seen so many people that had great potential that just wasted it and never didn't use it. And maybe they were successful and then they got out of the workplace and you never heard of them again and they weren't successful. I think it depends on what your objectives are in life and how you take a look at life. My story is one of interest. I was young. I was a 16-year-old college freshman. I was a 20-year-old coach in high school. The only job that I personally applied for was my first job in high school. The others, I was either asked to apply or asked if I would be interested, or I was actually recruited to do something. So I just went one step at a time, and I didn't realize it at the time, but I went from a high school coach to a high-level college coach to an athletic director at two different institutions, the NCAA and the Olympics. And when I was asked to be a consultant for the CEO Forum, when it was still inside Focus on the Family, it's when I started working with them, I realized that everything I had done was the Lord's plan. His plan for me was to do the work I was doing in the forum. And all these other jobs were just giving me the experience, the training, and the lessons I needed to learn to be able to work with CEOs in the U.S., be able to feel comfortable working with CEOs internationally in Singapore and Malaysia and China and Hong Kong, and be able to have a real impact there. And so that just helped me put everything in complete focus. I still view the same thing, the Lord's got a plan for my life. And every day I pray, well, reveal the plan you have for me for today, so I know that what I'm doing is what you want me to do.
Right. Let me ask a question on that, because one of maybe my favorite Bible verse that I've kind of tried to live by is Proverbs 16:9, and it goes, "In a heart a man plans his course, but the Lord directs his steps." And maybe it's just because my upbringing, we were a James kind of family, be doers of the word. And so I was taught to be an active planner and to be prepared, but ask the Lord to direct me. Sounds like you've had the ability to have a lot of things that seem to be preordained just kind of come. My experience is a little bit different, where I kind of had an idea of what I may want or not want to do, and then doors ended up opening and some ended up closing. But I was trying to be a vessel that was prepared to do what was required. But I never got it just seemed circumstance and situations then either opened or closed. But talk a little bit about, about how much important it is to be prepared and ready for whatever is going to come at you. Because I think there is a preparation. I believe that there's a preparation requirement, and much like you said, your experiences helped prepare you then for some of these later roles where you could be really impactful. I think that there's a preparation that is important, even to navigate and stay tuned in life. You got to be continually preparing yourself, and it's not just a laissez-faire type attitude. But there's a preparation. There's some work required to be ready.
With me, it was constant preparation. I grew up in a Christian home. Went to church every Sunday. I can probably count on both hands and feet the number of times I haven't been at a church somewhere in the world on a Sunday morning. I taught Sunday school. I tithe. But, I found out that doesn't make me a Christian. I'm doing the right things, and that does make me a Christian. And my faith developed step by step. For example, I was coaching at Iowa, and one day I got a call from a fellow who was president of the Fellowship of Christian Athletes. He said, we have this summer conference in Colorado every year, up at the YMCA at the Rockies, and we bring in a lot of coaches and a lot of athletes. And he says it's about 50% perspiration and 50% inspiration.
Right.
He said, I'd like to invite you and your family to come out for one of these sessions and just see what you think. So I got it worked into my schedule, and we went out, and it was really a good experience. And the last night, they have an open mic night before, we had world heavyweight champion and Olympic champion develop his strength and talk about his faith. And John Wooden talked about his faith and so forth. And we had key people like that spoke. But on the last night, and there were probably, I think, 500 or 600 athletes, high school athletes there, and a few college athletes that were supervisors. So it was open night. So anybody that wanted to say something about their week could do that. And that really impacted me because I heard quarterbacks that had been very successful in college share their faith and how important their relationship with Jesus was. And I heard this from player after player. And I thought to myself, here I am. I'm a coach. Sometimes I have a hard time sharing my faith with our team, even though we have a pregame prayer. Mm-hmm. But if these young guys have that kind of courage, I ought to have the same. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So that opened up a new phase of my life, gave me the courage to witness to other people. When I was the head coach, basketball coach at Iowa, I bet in the off season I would go 2 or 3 months at a time where I was speaking at a church service every Sunday, mm-hmm. invited in to speak.
Right.
And so that took me another step and another element. And so all this work I did kind of took me another step along my faith journey. And when I learned that you're not going to get to heaven by doing good deeds or being a good person, you're going to get there because of your faith and your trust and your personal relationship with Jesus. And that really came into my life as I became an athletic director and run the 2 biggest sports organizations in the world. Mm-hmm. So by the time I hit the forum and started working with MAC and CEOs, I could see then this was all a stepping stone developmental relationship for me to be able to feel comfortable talking to a CEO of a Fortune 500 company and talking to him about the Lord, of sharing in China. And what I would do in the morning, we'd have a session that would be on best business practices. And they all wanted to know what was going on in the U.S. business-wise. Afternoon, it was strictly spiritual, focus on Jesus, getting to know the Lord and so forth. And that training gave me the courage to do that, and at the same time work with some really high-level people. And it became clear to me that was the Lord's plan. And ever since then, I've been looking every day to see what his plan is.
Right. Because what's interesting about that is when you talk to pastors, their ability to influence is somewhat limited. Mm-hmm. Whereas people in the marketplace who interact with a wide array of people, many of which would never consider faith or let alone going to a church, have the ability to, through their example. And one of the things that has always impacted me is that when you look at 2,000 years ago and the success of the early church, they started off with feeding the poor, taking care of the widows. Then all of a sudden people were saying, what are these people all about?
Yeah.
Kind of what we talked about earlier, this whole thing of connecting with people, building relational capital and trust. Then all of a sudden they wanted to hear what these people, why are they doing this?
Yeah.
And even to the point, if you look at some of the history, you see the Roman government saying, hey, these people are being effective because they're doing this. So they are building this relational capital. And I think that's why it's so important, be it servant leadership or how you go about your day-to-day business. It's so important to set the right example, because that builds your credibility and then gives you the opportunity, because people want to know what you're all about. And so I think that becomes the key to success. I just want to talk a little bit more, because you brought up your experience in China. One of the questions is, as you've kind of gone through the world and you've had all these experiences, what have you seen that is kind of universal, and where have been some of the differences as you've kind of met various people, be it in Asia and Europe and different places throughout the world, as you've kind of been involved in business and then meeting these people and interacting with these people? What are the key universal similarities, and then what are some of the differences that you've observed?
Well, one thing that I did find out that was quite interesting, in China, I worked with several high-level CEOs, but we had about 4,000 or 5,000 people we were working with in 20 different cities. And it would take about 2 years to get around there. And so I found that in China, about 60% of those already had a faith, and their faith was very strong, and they really worshiped from the heart. And then the balance of them were just learning about the Lord. They were inquisitive and so forth. Then I get to Malaysia and Hong Kong, and especially Singapore. The people I worked with before were all high-level executives. And they had a strong faith, but they were hungry, to learn.
Mm-hmm.
And it was very open there. And I even had 2 or 3 of the top pastors that worked with us that were interested in seeing that happen. Malaysia was a little different because Muslim was the dominant factor there, but still we had about 40, I'd say, high-level business people that were strong Christians, and we could meet openly. There were a lot of changes in China. The first time I met with a group of CEOs, they asked me to meet them at this lobby of a certain hotel. And so I took a taxi and went there. And then two of them came and picked me up in the car and says, well, we're not going to meet here. We're meeting someplace else. And we drove for about 20 or 25 minutes, pulled into a parking lot, a 10-story building, not a light on. And we got out of the car and we went around to a back door and had a flashlight, opened the door, dark inside. We took an elevator up the 10th floor, walked down the hall with a flashlight, went into a room that was lighted, 50 CEOs there.
Mm-hmm.
And we had a powerful time of worship. And then 2 years later, we could have an event in a hotel in their space. And we had about 50 or 60 people that came there. And we had a 2-day event there in the afternoon. And the church was starting to open up in China. And we saw a lot of growth and a lot of development. And then, unfortunately, that all has been reversed now in the last 4 or 5 years.
Right.
But it was really interesting to see that happen and see the hunger of people wanting to do that. I've told a lot of people, you've never worshipped until you've worshipped with about 25 or 30 Chinese CEO. I mean, they'll put a video recording on that'll play music, and they'll sing, and then it'll come to a stop, and somebody will pray, and then they're back, and they're all praise songs. And I mean, it's coming from the heart. This is just dynamic.
Right.
And that was.
So you're
really
describing what you could call a kind of that universal learning for that kind of deep spiritual relationship.
Yeah, that's right.
And even though you have people that grew up in an environment,
they didn't have everything, and they had a need, and
Right.
the need for the help from the Lord was very important to them.
right?
Even in Singapore with the companies they were running, that was very important to them.
That's a powerful experience, and you've had opportunities and other parts of the world, be it in Europe and South America and things like that. Were there any observations there as you interacted with those folks? Did you see some of the same kind of universal curiosity and wanting to better understand and things of that nature? Maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. Well, I don't have the platform anymore that I had that gave me the ability to share with a lot of people. So I'm trying to find a different platform. I'm doing it individually now, and I found out, interestingly enough, it was a great witness on our part, bringing Jackie to church in a wheelchair every time, regardless of what the weather was like.
Right.
And I had so many people come up and say, you and your wife have been here regardless of the weather, and we felt ashamed of ourselves that we didn't come. And so you never know what kind of an impact that's going to have, because I had to bring her in a wheelchair, help her in the pew, and help her back out, leave in a wheelchair. And but that really impacted a lot of people, and our church has 4 different services, so it impacted the service we were going to. So that was interesting to me, that ended up being an effective way of witnessing without realizing it.
Now, do you think that, because I'll tell a story in a minute, but it seems that that's so much part of your nature, Jackie's nature. Maybe it's because you grew up born in 1929 and went through all that. There's just this stick-to-itiveness, this discipline, this expectation of powering through that I just find utterly amazing. I'll tell a story of when we were together at the Final Four in New Orleans, and we were on Bourbon Street, and we were at one of your favorite restaurants, and we had a great dinner, and it was time to go. And so we were trying to arrange transportation back. At the time, there was an impromptu parade band going down Bourbon Street, and it was bedlam, utter bedlam. And so the vehicle, the Uber that we called, couldn't get there. So they had to go it was 5 or 6 blocks we had to go. So, a quarter of a mile to get to the main street, past the band, through the band. And I was just utterly amazed with you and Jackie. In that case, Jackie, I believe, had her walker, powering through the band, eyes fixed forward, down the street, down Bourbon Street, all the way that quarter mile to the waiting Uber. And Faye and I, my wife and I, were looking at each other. We were kind of winded after powering through. And here the two of you were powering through. That was amazing. But I think it represented in a lot of ways the kind of essence of your experience, how you grew up, how you lived your life, how you took on the challenges and viewed none of them as insurmountable. And so it was impressive and indelible in my mind. So maybe talk a little bit about how you approach those things.
It's kind of an approach I had to start with my dad, and I've carried it through it. And he just said, don't start any project that you can't finish. If you start something you can't finish it, he said, you shouldn't have started it in the first place. And so that was part of my discipline, and that was And of course, all the discipline from coaching and management things, that was it. You know, if you're going to have a project, you're going to do it. You're going to be aware of all the liabilities, the minor problems you're going to deal with and get rid of them so you can keep moving forward.
Right. Keep moving forward.